A lot of people want to start writing, but they have burning questions they want answers to. And you might be one of them. So today I'm going to answer some of the questions that I've received from aspiring writers, and hopefully it will help you with some of your questions too. If you have any questions that I don't cover in today's episode, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get to it. So the first question is, how do I get started with writing, or how do I establish a writing routine? The easy answer here is to start writing, but I know it's not as easy as that. Because each person is different, my advice would be to see where you have pockets of time and prioritize that time for writing, whether it's a story you've been wanting to tell or just a random scene or dialogue. Just start writing something. And don't worry too much about how much time you have at the beginning. Even 10 minutes a day adds up over time. And you can always streamline your schedule as you need to. Now, the second question I get is, how can I improve my writing skills? One of the best ways to improve your writing skills is to read other stories and take note of the things that you're not as good at yet and practice writing those things, keeping in mind how published authors have done it. Another great way to improve your skills is to read craft books, take courses, or join writing communities where you can ask other writers for advice. The next question I get is, how do I develop my unique voice as a writer? This is one of those things that no one can teach you, unfortunately. Your voice is a very personal thing, and the only way to develop it is to keep writing. And at first, you might emulate or imitate your favorite author's voice, but that's okay. With practice, by which I mean to continue to write, you will start to develop a voice that is uniquely yours. The next question I get is, how do I plot and structure my story effectively? Now, there are different ways to plot a story depending on where you fall on the pantser-plotter spectrum. Now, just for clarification, a pantser is a writer who writes by the seat of their pants or discovers the story as they write, whereas a plotter would plot the story in advance. And I have talked about structure in one of my previous episodes, how to create an exciting plot in my Key Elements series, which I've linked below for you to check out. The next question I get is, how do I handle writer's block? So, writer's block is the condition of being unable to think of what to write or how to proceed with writing. Now, in my opinion at least, this means there are two types of blocks that you can experience with writer's block. Either you are blocked because you don't know what to do in your specific story, which is a story block, or you are unable to fix a problem in your writing, a craft block. Now, I've created an episode specifically for writer's block, which I've also linked in the description below for you that you can check out. The next question that I get is, how do I get my work published? In today's market, there are two main ways to get your work published. You can either traditionally publish, selling your story to a publisher like Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Macmillan, etc. Or you can self-publish or indie publish your story, which is selling your story directly to the market via Amazon or Kindle Direct Publishing, Google Play, Apple Books, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and so forth. Now, I cannot tell you which option you should choose because that is completely dependent on how you want to do it. But I urge you to do your research about which option might fit you the best. And just a note, you can always do hybrid publishing as well, where you do both traditional and self-publishing. The next question that I get is, how do I build an audience and market my work? Now, this is a difficult one to give a definite answer to because there are a lot of ways that you can build an audience and market your work. I would suggest that you join writing communities on social media or take some courses or classes that might help you to create the best publishing strategy for you. An amazing course that I would highly recommend, especially if you want to self-publish, is Sarra of Heart Breathing's course, Publish and Thrive. I believe enrollment will open again in August of this year. But if you follow her channel Heart Breathings, you will be the first to know when it opens. And I have linked all her details down below for you. The next question I get is, how can I balance writing with other responsibilities? This is challenging for a lot of writers, or anyone who wants to start any kind of side hustle business, to be honest. And the best advice I got for how to balance writing with other responsibilities was this: make sure you know what time you actually have to spend on your writing. This means that to balance your writing with your responsibilities, you can't allocate time for your writing that you don't actually have. So be as realistic and honest as possible when you're working on your writing schedule. And it's completely fine if you only have a few minutes a day or a couple hours a week. There is no rule that says you have to write every day. So don't let that stop you from writing the story that you want to write. The next question that I get is, how do I find an agent or a publisher? Alright, because I don't have an agent or publisher at the moment, I am not the expert on this one, but I do know from experience that your best bet would be to do the research. You can Google for agents and publishers who work in your genre. You can also check other authors in your genre's books to see if they mention who their agent or publisher is and approach them. You can also ask in writing or publishing forums or groups on social media to get advice for which agents or publishers you can look into. It is not necessarily going to be easy research, but it is vital. Also, don't just choose one agent or publisher to submit to. Your best chance would be to submit to various agents or publishers at a time. And just a quick note, some publishers do not allow unsolicited submissions, meaning you need to have an agent to submit to them. So also be aware of that before you try and submit to these publishers without an agent. Another question that I get often is, what are the best practices for editing and revising my work? The main thing to remember when it comes to editing is that its purpose is to improve your work. So you would ideally want various people to read through your story before you submit it to agents, publishers, or before you self-publish. Now, there are a couple of different stages of editing, and I'll go through them quickly. First is self-editing, which you typically do once you've completed your rough draft. Or you can start with self-editing as you're drafting if you're an edit-as-you-go kind of writer. The next editing phase is usually alpha readers and or critique partners, if you decide to include them. An alpha reader is usually the first person you show your work to, and it tends to be a spouse, a partner, or close friend, etc. Now, an alpha reader is not required, but some people do like to use them. A critique partner, on the other hand, is a fellow writer who reads your story from a writer's perspective and helps you edit for craft and story. Next is professional editors, and there are three main types of professional editors: developmental editors, copy editors, and line editors. You can find professional editors by researching on the internet, you can ask in writing communities for recommendations, or you can check in freelance editor associations in your country. Now, this is specifically if you are self-publishing, because if you are traditionally publishing, the publisher will usually provide an in-house editor that will go through your work. The next stage of the editing is normally for beta readers. A beta reader is someone who reads your story from a reader's perspective and gives you feedback as a reader. And the final stage of editing is proofreading. This is where you go over the story a final time to check for spelling, punctuation, or grammar errors. You can find professional proofreaders the same way that you find professional editors. Just a quick note on the editing process that I laid out here. This is an example of the typical process writers follow. It is not a rule. If you want to do or try something different, go ahead. Now, I do have some pro tips for you when it comes specifically to the editing phase. So when you're getting feedback, one of the best pieces of advice I got about getting feedback was from Brandon Sanderson. He basically says, when receiving feedback, the best thing you can do is to say nothing. Just listen. That is your only job at this point. If you need to defend or explain what you meant to do, or that the answers are coming later, or whatever you feel you need to say, then you've already lost, because you won't ever get the opportunity to explain your decisions to a reader. Therefore, the story has to be able to stand on its own and convey what you want it to. So listen to the feedback, don't say anything, and then you can analyze it and determine if it's worth changing. Now, on changing things according to suggestions and feedback. The tip here is don't just change something because one of your critique partners or beta readers suggested it. Remember, there is room for subjective opinions when you're soliciting feedback. But if multiple people suggest the same change, then I would consider looking into doing it. And then the last pro tip that I want to give you is when you use an alpha reader, critique partners, or beta readers, always thank them for their feedback and suggestions, whether you agree with them or not. Remember, they took time and energy to read your work when they possibly could have done something else that's also important to them. So don't forget to thank them for their time, energy, and input. Alright, so that is some of the questions that I get asked quite often when someone wants to start their writing journey or career. And I hope you found this episode helpful. And if you did, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as I said at the start of this episode, if you have a question that I didn't go over, please let me know in the comments below. So, until next time, may your creativity flow freely and your fingers dance upon the keys. Keep writing with joy and stay connected. Cheers.